Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome back to the second half and part 9 of Dogman, Bigfoot, Werewolf, and Wildman historic experiences in the media. Before we get into this, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description below. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel continuing to grow and go, just simply subscribe and click the like button. It's fast and free. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get into today's second half. Shall we? Source: the Helena Independent, Montana Territory, United States of America, October 28th, 1882. A wild man in Idaho, two voracious cowboys see and chase the solitary savage of Snake River. Snake River, Idaho, October 28th, 1882. Two cowboys who just came in from Camas Prairie relate an experience which will probably go a great way towards reestablishing the popular faith in the wild man's tradition. On the first day of this month, two cowboys were searching for cattle lost in a storm, passed over some lava crags, and were startled by suddenly seeing before them a form so often described to them. They were so terrified that they sat upon their horses looking at it in dread. Mustering courage and drawing their revolvers, they dismounted and gave chase. But the strange being skipped from crag to crag, as nimble as a mountain goat. After an hour's pursuit, both young men were so completely worn out that they had laid down, seeing which the wild man approached them and stopped on the opposite side of the gorge in the lava, from which point he regarded the cowboys intently. The latter would not shoot, as they considered it would be unjustifiable, though they kept their pistols ready to use, while carefully returning the compliment, thoroughly inspecting the phantom of Snake River. The wild man was considerably over 6 feet in height, with great muscular arms which reached to his knees. The muscles stood out in great knots, and his chest was as broad as a bear. Skins twisted about his feet and ankles, and a wolf skin about his waist. All parts of his body to be seen were covered by long black hair, while from his head the hair flowed over his shoulders in coarse, tangled rolls, and mixed with a heavy beard. His face was dark and swarthy, and his eyes shone brightly. While white tusks protruded from his mouth, his fingers were the shape of claws, with long, sharp nails, and he acted very much as a wild man which is unaccustomed to seeing men. The boys made all kinds of noise, at the sound of which he twisted his head from side to side and moaned. Apparently he could not give them any back talk, so wearying of eyeing him, the two boys fired their revolvers, whereupon the wild man turned a double somersault, jumped 15 feet to a low bench, and disappeared, growling terribly as he went. It is supposed that this is the same apparition that has so often been seen before. The man, no doubt, does as the Indians did for substance and lives on the camas rods, which grow wild by the acre, and he no doubt kills young stock. As many yearlings and calves disappear mysteriously, and nothing but skeletons of them are ever found. The boys at the stock camp are arranging to go out on a scout again to overtake him, when, being provided with lariats, they will lasso him and bring him to Haley to deliver him up to the county authorities. Source: the Nevada State Journal, USA, August 26, 1882. A wild woman in Missouri, Marvel, Missouri, August 26, 1882. A nude colored woman, wild as a gorilla, is startling the people of Marvel section, 20 miles out on the Midland Railroad. She has been seen several times, and the last time threw a young lady who was horseback riding into hysteria, and with a grunt not unlike that of a wild hog jumped up and ran into the forest. At the time of her discovery, she was burrowing into the side of the road, catching and eating crayfish, which she ate, claws, hide, and all. As yet, nothing can be ascertained as to her identity, but steps will soon be taken to that end. She is very black and foams at the mouth when angry, like a wild man at bay. Source: the New York Times, New York, USA, February 10th, 1883. Atlanta, Georgia, February 9th, 1883. For some time, a wild man has been creating excitement along the line of the Western and Atlantic Railroad. He has been seen to eat dead animals and wraps himself in horsehide. This morning, he was seen at Morganville with a dead rabbit in his hand, biting it vigorously. He had a sack round his head. Citizens attempted to lasso him, but as they would close in upon him, he would take a bound and elude them. He refused to talk. Finally, he bounded into the woods and disappeared. A party has been formed to follow him up. Source: the Newark Daily Advocate, Ohio, USA, April 21st, 1883. A Kentucky wild man, Paducah County, Kentucky, April 21st, 1883. Among the passengers the other night bound for New York from the west on the day express as a wild man who occupied a seat in smoking car number 153. He was accompanied by James Harvey and Raymond Boyd, his captors, both of whom belonged to the Paducah County, Kentucky. They had 3 second-class tickets to New York, which privileges them to 3 seats in the smoking car of any first-class train. When the day express arrived at the Broad Street station at 8 o'clock, James Harvey ran down the platform into a restaurant and purchased a box of sardines and some sandwiches for the wild man's supper. His companion remained in the smoker in charge of the wild man. He was dressed in citizen's dress and wore a big cloth shoes. His hair reaches nearly to his waist and falls over his shoulders, completely covering his back. His beard is long and thick, while his eyebrows are much heavier than those of ordinary human being. There is nothing imbecilic about the wild man's manners of action. He cannot talk and seldom makes any sound whatever except a low howl like a leopard. His actions are much like those of a hyena in the zoological garden, as it is possible for anything in human form to be. Raymond Boyd, who seemed to have perfect control over this wild man, said his body was covered with coarse brown hair, as thick as the hair on a horse's hide. The palms of his hand looked like paws of a bear, and his fingernails, which were over an inch long, resembled the claws of an eagle. He was first seen in Paducah County 13 years ago, and was known as Mum the Hermit because whenever alone accosted, all he would say is, "Mum is the word." He lived in an old pine hut in the woods for about 5 years and was seldom seen by anyone. Finally, he abandoned the hut and took up his abode in the cave under a ledge of rocks known as the Lizard Rock. A little over 6 years ago, 2 or 3 citizens of Paducah County, while out hunting, saw him running into his cave without a stitch of clothing on. He was seen several times after that wearing no clothing. 3 years ago it was discovered that a thick coat of hair had grown all over his body, Boyd and Harvey built a man trap for him over the 3 days before he entered it. He was not afraid of any bird or beast of prey, but ran terrified away from any human being who approached him. It took 2 days to accustom the man-beast to their presence. The tinkle of a small dinner bell they used would have a great influence over him. He watched the bell intently, but would not touch it. Some time ago, a farmer missed a calf and 2 sheep which had strayed off. They were tracked to Mum's cave. Here all trace of them was lost, and it is supposed he devoured them in his cave which he had occupied for the last 7 or 8 years. Boyd and Harvey found the skeletons of small animals and the skins of over 50 snakes. Some of the skins belonged to the most venomous species of reptile. The floor of the cave was alive with red and green lizards, and hundreds of toads hopped about. The wild man ate a box of sardines ferociously, and 2 sandwiches, which were handed to him, were greedily pulled apart. He ate the ham and threw the bread away. Whenever a train passed on the opposite track, he crouched down in the corner of the seat, terror-stricken. After the train passed by, he would put his hand to his ear and listen with a look of an animal cunning stealing out of the restless eyes, like a panther about to pounce on its prey. Every time the engineer blew his whistle, the wild man would grab the back of the seat with both hands and hold on until the whistle ceased blowing. Boyd had a little tin music box, which he manipulated with a crank. The one tune of "Empty is the Cradle" was the ground again and again, to great satisfaction, or the ex-hermit, who sat and looked at it silently, would not touch it. When conductor Harry Smith took out his glistening nickel-plated punch to cancel the tickets, the wild man watched the punch intently until he heard it snap. Then he got down in the corner of the seat, fairly shivering with fear, and set up with a low howl, supposing evidently that conductor Smith was about to wing him. Boyd and Harvey said that there is a story to the effect that the wild man had originally come from North Carolina, and that during the war he had been a sharpshooter on Bald Mountain, and that shortly after the war he had murdered a whole family of settlers in the mountain and fled. Both Boyd and Harvey appear like shrewd fellows, and accept to make a fortune out of their prize. Their great anxiety and fear is that the authorities will interfere with him and claim that the man is simply a lunatic and place him in some institution. They had the snake skins in the box in the baggage car, together with some other curiosities found in the cave. Boyd said that the wild man will never touch anything but fruit and meat, which he eats ravenously, and much to the same as a wild beast. Cigar smoke bothered him a good deal, and he kept driving it away from him with his claw hands. When the train arrived in New Jersey, the men took a carriage and said they were going to take it to New Hampshire. And we're going to take the New Haven night boat from the foot of Peck Slip and avoid a daylight crowd in New York in case they cannot make terms with Barnum or some other prominent circus man. They intend on exhibiting their prize themselves as soon as they can extensively advertise him, beginning in New York City sometime in May. In the meanwhile, they are going to keep him in some secluded place in Long Island. Source: Newark Daily Advocate, Ohio, USA, March 6, 1883. Unknown animal pursued, Apex, North Carolina, March 5, 1883. The appearance of an unknown animal near here has caused great excitement. The footprints are a foot long and 8 inches wide. The animal has been seen twice from a train. Pursuit was begun yesterday by over 100 men. It has killed 3 valuable horses at Charlotte, North Carolina. Source: the Bucks County Gazette, Bristol, Pennsylvania, USA, May 24th, 1883. Ferocious wild man reported, Pulaski County, Virginia, May 24th, 1883. A ferocious wild man is reported to be roaming the woods of this county and making attacks upon people he encounters. He is said to be fully 6 feet tall, very muscular, entirely naked, with long matted hair and a beard. He has been pursued by parties, but was too fleet of feet for them. A man found beaten to death in the woods is believed to have been killed by him. Source: Davenport Gazette, Iowa, July 13th, 1883. Wild man hunted. Boone, Iowa, July 13th, 1883. 100 person spent Sunday the 8th hunting the woods near here for a wild man who has been wandering about in the vicinity for some time. No trace of this man was found. He has been seen by several persons and is supposed to be a crazy young man who is said to have gotten away from his friends while passing through Boone some time ago. When last seen, he had nothing but remains of a pair of pants. Source: the Willsboro Agitator, Pennsylvania, USA, July 17th, 1883. Wild man right at home, Austinburg, Pennsylvania, July 17th, 1883. The periodical stories of wild men and sea serpents has ceased. Excite must interest, and now a correspondent tells of a veritable wild man, or a man reported to be wild, right at home. He is clothed in rags, with scarcely enough of them to cover his body, and both hair and whiskers reach below his waist. He has been seen but a few times. Source: the Atlanta Constitution, Georgia, USA, July 28th, 1883. Hunting a wild man, Mason, Ohio, July 28th, 1883. The people here are in a great state of excitement over the discovery yesterday of a wild man in the woods. A party of women and children attending a picnic in the woods belonging to a Jacob Basor came across the wild man sleeping in a blackberry patch. He is described as entirely nude with long hair and beard. His skin is of a copper color, and he presents a frightful appearance. A party of men has started out with the determination of capturing this monster. Source: Toronto Daily Mail, July 28th, 1883. Appearance of a strange and gigantic man. His very remarkable departure. From our own correspondent, Kingston, Ontario, July 27th, 1883. One of Mr. Peter McLaurin's drivers on the Mississippi Road has seen a strange sight. He was sitting in his tent when suddenly, upon the foreground of the shadows produced by the departing fire, he distinctly saw the outlines of a man appear whose height was about 8 feet. His hair was long and shaggy and hung about his face. He had a vest but no sleeves to his coat, knickerbocker pants with hairy legs and arms. He stood still at the threshold of the brightness and was questioned whence he came. There was no response, whereupon the citizen picked up a large stone and hurled it with all his force, striking the strange object midship, and it fell within a splash into the water. Hasting to spot, he saw the stranger arise and depart swiftly, and though he searched for many hours, there were no reward. Source: Jerome Clark, 2005, Unnatural Phenomenon. It initially came from the Atchison Globe, Kansas, July 19th, 1883. Beast or human being, Lafayette, Kansas, July 1883. Walking through a wooded area near Lafayette one July day, Miss Frank Kaufman, the wife of a well-known farmer, noticed something strange to her. It was an ordinary creature, female in contour, with long black hair blowing in the wind. Short gray hair covered its body. It was breaking twigs from the sassafras bush and eating the bark. At first, the creature was oblivious to Miss Kaufman's presence. As the witness stood paralyzed with terror, the figure turned around and saw her. It glared in what Miss Kaufman took to be anger, raised its arms, and let out a hideous shriek. It ran into the forest, presumably on 2 legs. Thought the account isn't clear on the point. Finally, the farmer's wife recovered sufficiently to run in the opposite direction. As she approached her house, shouting, her husband heard her, caught her just as she collapsed. After carrying her into the house, he grabbed a rifle and alerted the neighborhood. A party of 100 men and boy with hunting dogs searched the site and soon came upon the creature. They set off in her pursuit, sometimes getting close, but in each case the animal was able to outwit them. A contemporary newspaper reported for a full half-mile of the chase she was never out of sight. Her feet touched the ground but seldom. She would grab the underbrush with her long, bony hands and swing from bush to bush, limb to limb, with wonderful ease. She seemed only endeavored to keep beyond the reach of her pursuers until, coming to a swamp, she had disappeared as suddenly and effectively as extinguishing a light, and no search served to ascertain her whereabouts. The press could only speculate that the creature was either a wild woman or an escaped gorilla. Daily Advocate, Newark, Ohio, USA, August 1st, 1883. Man or gorilla, the extraordinary character who is scaring Canucks. Pembroke, Ontario, August 1st, 1883. Pembroke has a lively situation in the shape of a wild man, 8 feet high and covered with hair. He haunts are on Priddis Island, a short distance from Town, and the people are so terrified that no one has dared to venture on the island for several weeks. 2 raftmen named Towie and Salmon, armed with weapons, plucked up sufficient courage to scour the woods in hope of seeing the monster. At about 3 in the afternoon, their curiosity was rewarded. He emerged from the thicket, having one hand on a tomahawk made of stone and the other a bludgeon. His appearance struck such terror in the hearts of the raftsmen that they made tracks for their boat, which was moored by the beach. The giant followed them, uttering demonic yells and gesturing wildly. They had barely time to get onto their boat and pull a short distance out into the stream when he hurled the tomahawk at them, striking Tutley in the arm and fracturing it. Salmon fired 2 shots, but neither took effect. The giant retreated at the first sound of the firearm. It is more than probable that the townspeople will arrange an expedition to capture, if possible, what Tuffer described as the man who looks like a gorilla wandering about in a perfectly nude condition with the exception of face completely covered in thick growth of black hair. Source: The Chester Times, Pennsylvania, August 8, 1883. The Ohio Wild Man captured, Mason, Ohio, August 7, 1883. A few days ago, a wild man was discovered in the woods near here. Since then, a party of men had been in pursuit of him, and last night he was captured by the city marshal, Constable Corriganton, and lodged in jail. He was entirely nude. His hair is long and his beard bushy and unkempt. His keen black eyes give him a frightful appearance. He cannot speak except by groans and grunts. When spoken to in jail, he threw himself on the floor and raved like a maniac. He was taken today to the county infirmary in Lebanon. Source would be Cater Daily Republican, Illinois, USA, August 24th, 1882. A wild boy in Texas, Sulphur Springs, Texas, August 24th, 1883. Mr. Ed Good stated that he saw a wild boy at this location, which is about 14 miles north of Jasper. He described the boy as appearing, from the size, to be about 10 or 12, hair rather light in color, hanging below his shoulders, his body perfectly nude, not a particle of clothing of any kind about him. He was picking and eating berries when he was seen by Mr. Good. Approached within a few rods of him by moving stealthily before the boy perceived him. The latter flight. Good believes him to be a veritable wild boy. If it be so, he might be captured and the mystery of his life unraveled. All right, Dogman fam, that is the 9th installment of Dogman, Bigfoot, Werewolf, and Wildman, historic experiences in the media. I hope you're enjoying these as much as I'm enjoying sharing them with you. With that, may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.